What's up, everyone? Welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and this is Crossover Commerce, presented by PingPong Payments, the leading global payments provider helping sellers keep more of their hard-earned money. What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and welcome to episode 57 of Crossover Commerce, presented by PingPong Payments. PingPong provides marketplace sellers and entrepreneur global solutions for controlling their domestic and international funds. An account with us enables companies to significantly reduce their costs when receiving or making international payments, all in one platform that help increase operational efficiencies. It saves time and allows sellers to manage their business profits all from a single source. To find out more information, we actually did the work for you. We already put the link to our website in the comment and descriptions below if you're watching this or listening to this, no matter where you are doing so. Again, thank you for joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as Twitter, or if you're watching and listening to us later on, wherever you download your podcast. Again, that's Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. Truly, wherever you can download a podcast, we are available. So do me a favor, again, for those who are fans of the show, or if this is your first time, share this episode on social media and hit that reminder button or to be notified of future episodes of Crossover Commerce. Again, follow PingPong Payments or myself on social media. Again, that's Ryan Kramer. Just search for me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook even. You can actually see us go live 4 to 5 times per week with leaders in the Amazon and e-commerce space. So if you're watching us now, go ahead and tell us what you think in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from, what you're thinking about the show so far, what you would like to hear, or just general questions. We'd like to see those and respond to those throughout the episode. And again, if you can't catch us live, make sure that you save the episodes for a later time and tag us in the comments with your thoughts. So about our guest today, just wanted to walk through SellerSnap as well as the company that we're going to be talking with today. SellerSnap is a fully automated proprietary AI-powered game theory, Amazon repricer, and analytics tool. Whew, that's a mouthful. Their AI algorithm repricer will apply the optimum strategy for every and each individual listing to maximize profit while avoiding price wars. SellerSnap designed an algorithm to think like a real Amazon seller. That's fantastic. And their technology is capable for detecting the behavior of a specific competitor and making tailored price adjustments to outsmart the competition. Our guest today is actually an e-commerce pro. Originally from Los Angeles, California, he runs SellerSnap's sales and customer success team from Tel Aviv, Israel, helping professional Amazon sellers level up their repricing activities. When he's not helping guide sellers through the Amazon journey, he enjoys bike rides and playing ultimate frisbee. Welcome to the show, Ian from SellerSnap. Ian, welcome to Crossover Commerce. How are you doing today?
Hey, Ryan, I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here and, talk about SellerSnap, talk about PingPong, selling on Amazon, and, everything in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just kind of dipped our toes into your background. You said e-commerce pro. That can mean a little bit of everything. So you're a former e-commerce seller or still e-commerce seller or Amazon seller. What does that mean? E-commerce pro.
Yeah. So, really going back to my very early years, I was actually found myself working in e-commerce from the age of 13 or 14, really on the floor of a warehouse at a company called Sports Section out of Northridge, California. And in that space, I was, it's a summer job. I was doing everything from picking and pulling from the shelves and getting them into boxes to receiving and documenting all the returns, and this was before I even knew I was going to end up in the Amazon space. I was taking pictures of items that didn't have a whole lot of quantity, so they can move them from the company's, well, at that time it was catalog business and website to Amazon itself. And so from there, I found myself in a couple other roles. Again, these were kind of family businesses, doing bits and bobs in between school and baseball and things like that. So, my background goes back into that. And then From there, after school, worked a lot in sales, worked in the ad tech space, and then I found myself at SellerSnap nearly 3 years ago. Really heading up the sales and the customer success team, and working hand in hand with Amazon sellers in order to really optimize Amazon stores and their businesses in the BuyBox.
That's awesome. So I don't know if I just didn't hear it, or you are currently selling. Are you still selling on Amazon or no?
So we're not selling on Amazon in any way. But again, we work with hundreds of sellers with their store on a day-to-day basis.
Right, absolutely. I didn't know if you personally were actually selling on Amazon, and that's where that expertise came from. If not, that's not a big deal whatsoever. So again, what kind of prompted you? That's a fascinating story in terms of like you were taking pictures and you kind of saw where kind of the processes fit, almost like the puzzle pieces and how they were going to fit later on when you were talking about taking pictures and whatnot. That's really funny and unique in terms of like as a kid or at a younger age. Is that something that has always like driven you, is how to problem solve for people, if that makes sense? If that's like I'm going to find a better solution to do for what is currently out there.
I wouldn't say it was in terms of problem solving that's what really sparked my interest. I would really say that what kind of sparked my interest in all of that was the logistics behind getting something from A to B, right? Because I really was able to understand that, multiple times a week, the same driver would come every single day, drop off boxes and boxes and boxes full of inventory merchandise. We would unpack everything, sort it, and inventory it in our own way, put them on the shelf in the warehouse, and then kind of in that same vein, we would be processing those orders, pulling those items right back off the shelf and putting them into boxes and Jiffy bags and getting them out. And so I think that part of e-commerce, even though it's not the part of e-commerce that I work in today in terms of selling, really, really interests me, is really getting deep down into the logistics, because it's, again, that is kind of problem solving, putting, finding the right pieces to the puzzle in its own way.
Absolutely. And again, for those who are listening today, again, happy President's Day. We are still on with Ian before this. When I booked this, I didn't even realize today was a holiday for most of our company, if not most people. But he made a great point. Amazon doesn't stop. Doesn't matter what holiday you're on. It doesn't stop. The world keeps turning. It's still business as usual to day to day. So if you're listening, thank you for joining us on potentially your day off. But if you're an Amazon seller, definitely not stopping working. Probably so yeah, something's working, whether it's like your team or yourself, or you're looking for something. I know Chinese New Year just kind of rolled around, last week. It's still a lot of factories that are shut down in that capacity. So SellerSnap, I heard AI algorithms, or it's AI functionality, and it can think like an Amazon seller. That is both terrifying but also amazing in terms of that capacity. So let's dive into it. What is the core functionality of SellerSnap, and then also why this might matter to kind of our overall discussion of like winning the BuyBox today?
Yeah. So SellerSnap was established to really do two things. The first thing is to avoid price wars, to avoid those nasty price wars that race to the bottom. We know that that's a huge pain point for a lot of Amazon sellers. And the second thing is to get the BuyBox at the highest possible price. And that really goes hand in hand with avoiding those price wars, because we know that we have an effect on our competition, just like our competition has an effect on us. And being able to use AI technology to understand the decisions that our competitors are going to make based on the decisions that we make really put us in a position where we're able to kind of think a few steps ahead, much like a seller would do or a person would do in chess. And the idea is that it really separates the repricing of a rule-based repricer, where you would put in a series of rules that says if then if A, then do B. And instead of just following kind of those really rigid rules, what the AI will do is it understands the situation and will switch strategies based on what's happening in the current landscape.
Awesome. So when you're thinking a step ahead, obviously that means a couple different things. You're trying to beat the competition, or you're trying to not the race to the bottom, but also like try to outsmart them in that capacity. Is this a hands-off approach, or is this something more like you have to go and tweak, and with this technology, you have to kind of like tweak it how you want it to think, like put in rules, so that if like almost like PPC, right? You have to put rules in place. Like if the bid gets too high, then completely shut off and no more bidding. Is that something similar with SellerSnap?
That's a really good question, Ryan. So, there's a few different aspects in there that we have to think about. So the first thing is, if the bid, I'm no PPC expert, but what it sounds like to me is that we're talking about mins and max prices, right? The minimum is the absolute minimum price that I can get in order to make sure I cover my costs, and the maximum price is on the other end to make sure that I'm still giving reasonable prices to my customers, because that's something that's super important to Amazon as well in terms of customer experience. And so we're talking about, and when we're talking about like, is it a hands-on or hands-off approach? Mm-hmm. The ads out of the box, SellerSnap is a really hands-off approach. Our software is really kind of plug and play, put in those mins and maxes and turn on the AI and let the AI do its thing. But on the other side, we do know that there's, hundreds of thousands of Amazon sellers out there, millions of products. And then to say that there's like a one size fits all solution for everything, it would just not be true. And so that's why SellerSnap also offers the customizability to be able to build additional rules and conditions on top of the AI in order to really optimize the technology to work for your individual store, your individual use case. But just like I said, we're looking to be as hands-off as possible by using that kind of AI right out of the box.
That's awesome. So so a couple things when I think about this, if I'm a seller right now, when's a good time that I need to engage with a tool like this? Because a lot of like repricing comes with like either multiple products and you just don't have that time and capability to either jump in and kind of watch your competition, or B, you're leading the BuyBox or winning the BuyBox anyways. What is that perfect time that sellers need to look at? Hey, there's an opportunity for either SellerSnap to come in, or a tool or technology like you guys to come in and kind of like support them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is kind of understanding when is the right time to go find a repricing solution and implement that repricing solution, because they're two very different, very different things. So to answer the question about when is the best time to find a repricing solution is now. If you are this deep in a podcast for e-commerce and Amazon sellers, you obviously there's a reason why you're here. And you're here to learn, you're here to understand what the environment is like, what's new, what are best practices. And so that means that you are probably deep enough in your Amazon journey that you've experienced the reasons why people need the BuyBox or need to get a repricer, and that's to win the BuyBox. A lot of sellers will, for the very early parts of their Amazon journey, will be doing it manually. And, that makes sense when you only have a handful of listings. But as you grow and as you scale, you need to work with automation because all of your competitors are. And it's it's a really integral tool that you need to implement in order to keep up.
Gotcha.
And so, I've said this before, and I might get crucified for this, is that if you are competing for the BuyBox and your competitors and you have competitors for the BuyBox, go get a repricer. And the part that I'll get crucified for is Amazon has a free repricing solution. Personally, I'm not a huge fan, but it's better than nothing.
Right.
doing and that's kind of a lot of Amazon sellers might appreciate that doing a little bit of something is better than doing a whole lot of nothing. And then again, implementation is a different animal, but you want to think about what is going to save me time in the long term. So if you have a repricer handling your automation, that means that you can go and do the other things that you're good at, whether it's sourcing, logistics, or everything else in between.
Absolutely. And I think the point that you're making is, even though Amazon has a tool, it doesn't mean it's the best tool. And that's not something what PingPong Payments does is, we know that Amazon has their own currency conversion tool. It's fantastic in terms of, that's what exists out there, but it's not always the most cost-effective tool. But that's where, solutions like us come into play. That's where Seller Snap comes into play. So obviously there's where innovation and growth kind of come from. So it makes complete sense. How does it get integrated? So I want to understand, is it just something that sits on top of my Seller Central account? Like how does something like this get integrated just for my, my own account, essentially?
I mean, most sellers at one point or another will come across having to authorize a developer through their Seller Central account. And that's exactly what we do. We send our developer ID, we get authorized, and that account gets set up, and then you can get going. So we're basically plugged straight into your Seller Central account, but it is a standalone app that you would have access to in order to, view all the different data points that we offer and, manipulate your mins and maxes and turn on repricing and change strategy and all that other good stuff.
Awesome. So yeah, that makes sense. Really quickly, want to acknowledge the people watching from LinkedIn. Hello, everyone who is watching around the world. And I know that we're an international podcast, so the questions are going to come from an international perspective. So hello, everyone. Again, if you have questions specifically for Ian or myself, thank you for watching, but also go ahead and ask those below. I know I'm trying to learn. This is a perspective I'm not as familiar with AI repricing tools, so I'm going to ask all of the dumb questions for everyone today, and go from there. Let Ian kind of make us look really smart at the end of this podcast. But Ian, the questions that I have are, again, maybe this is something that everyone kind of knows the benefits from, but I would like to educate people if this is something that's new. And like you said, they're in the journey. They really want to do the best they can in terms of like their next step forward. But let's even take it a step back further. What is a BuyBox for people who might have heard the term, but they're like, and they kind of know what it is? Why is that important for an Amazon seller to know?
All right. So taking it back, actually, it was really funny when I first came on to Seller Snap, and I was talking to my friends and family about Seller Snap. My mom actually asked the same exact question, and then I tried explaining it, and she was like, "Oh, this doesn't matter to me. This only matters to your clients, and I don't need to understand it." And I was like,
Right.
"But wait, like you interact with it more than you
all
know,
the time,
right?
Exactly,
all the time." And so, so really taking it back, what is the BuyBox? In the simplest of terms, the BuyBox is the section of the page on an Amazon listings where you see those buttons that's either add to cart or buy now. And so that is where all of these third-party sellers that live on Amazon and selling on Amazon are competing for to capture that sale. And so to take that a little bit further, 3P sellers or third-party sellers account for more than 60% of the physical product sales on Amazon. And so that means whenever you go and you're buying, I don't know if it's a bar of soap, if it's a brand like like Dial or Dove or anything like that, chances are there's a lot of different companies out there who all have this product, who all want you to buy it from them. And so they're competing to get into that buy box. So when you click on buy now or add to cart, it comes from their inventory and they're the ones to get paid. And so we know, and this was a report put out by Amazon already a couple of years ago, and some of the numbers might have changed, but something like I think it was 80% of Amazon sales go through the BuyBox. Right. So, and then even more than 80% go through the buy box when people are buying on their mobile devices. And so that means being in the buy box gets you the sales, because there's always additional sellers, and for those savvy Amazon buyers, they might go to the other page and say, hey, I realize I can pay a little bit less if I wait a little bit longer. But for the most part, people want it now. People want their items in 2 days. And now I know in a lot of major metropolitan cities, it's even 1 day, and it's incredibly fast. But again, it's because of the awesome customer experience, and because you have those third-party sellers that are competing there to, again, get in there, but also and to make that sale.
So yeah, for lack of a better definition, it's whatever the again, when you add to cart or purchase now, like the one-click solution, purchase now, or add to a wish list or whatever, that solution, whoever it's being sold by, it's from that seller. Even though that product might be sold by 10 different competitors, same ASIN, same product, same across the board, it might be sold, that's the one seller that Amazon is serving up to you as the person who's searching for it when they click on that listing, essentially the first one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or the best one, right? So the algorithm for Amazon's buy box it's a closely guarded secret, and no one truly knows what's going on over there. But there's a lot of assumptions that can be made. And so a lot of the times with repricers and with sellers in general, we're thinking about simply the lowest price. And but it's crucial to remember that winning the buy box is more than just having a low price, because other factors that weigh in are the competitive landscape, inventory levels, review status, customer service, do I have shipping, and and all other kinds of metrics that Amazon keeps tabs on that may or may not be transparent to these third-party sellers. And but at the end of the day, a lot of the times it does come down to price when there's a lot of sellers that are all kind of on the same level of some of these different metrics that I mentioned, and that's when pricing is really kind of the key indicator.
So what would I need to worry about this if I have a patented product, or if I have the one and only product where this exists in the Amazon ecosystem, where there's a copyright or a patent?
Yeah, and so I think you're referring to private label or white label items. The answer is no. There's a pretty big consensus that that white label products don't need repricing. If you ask me, and let's be fair, I'm a bit biased. I'm coming from a repricer. There are opportunities to reprice our items for different reasons than capturing the buy box. And so while the question of, do I need a repricer to capture the buy box when I'm the only seller on a listing? No, you don't need that. But you might need a repricer for other reasons.
Right. Walk me through those reasons why, if I'm a private label, which a lot of people are, why would I need to understand repricing software like this?
Yeah. So one of the biggest reasons is, a lot of times I talk to, white label sellers or private label sellers, and they say, look, I don't have competition. And what they're really saying is, I don't have competition for the buy box, which is true, but that doesn't mean you don't have competition. And so what we see a lot of the times is that, maybe a seller has, I used the example of soap earlier. Maybe a seller has their own type of, their own private label soap. And because nobody else is selling it, they're not competing for the buy box, but they still have competition because they are competing against the Dials and the Doves and all the other products out there. And so in terms of repricing, how we can think about that is attaching ourselves to some of these items to understand, to put ourselves in a competitive position. So when sellers are comparing the different products, your price is part of that comparison. So one of the things that SellerSnap has done is we have a repricing method that's called follow related ASIN or follow multiple related ASIN, which is a secondary repricing solution. And basically what sellers will do is that they'll take the ASIN of a competitive listing. So again, if I'm selling my own soap product, I can take the competitive ASIN of Dial and say, all right, I want you to follow their price up and down by minus a penny or minus $1. And so I can put myself in a position where I'm actually presenting a better price than, one of these leading brands and try to capture sales that way. Because again, when we're talking about Dial soap, there's probably all of these other third-party sellers out there manipulating the price. And so I still want to stay competitive with that, with the price of the bigger brand as it's being manipulated by those third-party sellers.
Does this, I mean, that makes sense. And obviously we can go into more like the game theory and things like that in terms of like competition. And we'd love to dive into that a little bit more. Does this solution or does repricing look at, because Amazon's a big stickler in terms of having the lowest price out there in terms of where your product's being, sold. Does this take into account other locations and marketplaces where it might be your other competing products or your products being sold across the web, like on other marketplaces, or I would say like your competition is selling on their own website? Or is this just an Amazon ecosystem tool?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we really live and thrive solely in the Amazon ecosystem. And because that Amazon does keep tabs on the other marketplaces. And so there are things that affect us and our sellers when that happens, such as suppressed BuyBox, pricing errors, things like that. But in terms of what the data that SellerSnap uses and the decisions that we make is strictly within the Amazon ecosystem.
Okay. That makes sense. And that's something, of course, like every Amazon seller has to be aware of too, because Amazon they'll cut your listing or they will suspend your listing if you're not the lowest price on there. I talked about this on some other podcasts as well for myself. Is I used to live in the space where there's easy ways to manipulate pricing in terms of that are strictly fair. But when Amazon looks at your website, or they'll even look at your ASINs and then cross compare them to what might be sold on your websites. There's easy ways to get around that, for example. And again, we can go on like game theory and how to like manipulate price online to benefit the seller. You can have it so that it's matching on Amazon, but then you can have, like, for example, if you have your own branded website, you can have coupons for your loyalty following. So if they come to your website, say, hey, you can have 15% off if you use promo code, thanks, or something like that. It'll drop your price down lower. Amazon doesn't see that as a competition because they can't connect those dots because of all the different backend stuff as well. So that's if you want to list your pricing even higher and drop it down to where it is on Amazon. It just really depends on where you want the purchase to be made. And then obviously if you want it to be captured on your own branded website, you get a couple things. You get someone's email, you get a discount, and then you get a loyal follower. So that's kind of the competition. And that's where what you were talking about, pricing and game theory, and how do you want people to eventually make that purchase with you as well. So I said game theory earlier. Talk me through what game theory is and why that's important for sellers to really be focused on and know what that is in terms of, just being an entrepreneur online.
Sure. Well, in game theory, there's a few different aspects of that. But what we really focus on here at SellerSnap is the prisoner's dilemma. And the idea of the prisoner's dilemma, in short, is that if the prisoners work together, they get out. But if they go against each other, they both stay in prison for a long period of time. And so where SellerSnap comes into play is that we take a cooperative approach to the BuyBox. And so that goes into the price war and avoiding those price wars. So what we're aiming to do is, instead of really just going after our competition and driving that price down, we say, hold up, what is our fair share of BuyBox? Like, what do I deserve being on this listing, right? And then from there, we can set our targets, and then we set that target BuyBox share. And once we hit it, we work to raise the price, because we're always trying to balance, right? It's a difficult balance about staying in the BuyBox, but also getting at the highest price, because they're kind of two forces counteracting each other. So what we're doing is we are, again, taking the most fair route that we can in order to hit both of those key performance indicators out that we've been talking about this whole episode.
Yep. So basically raising the price, but also not saying, hey, I want 100% of the BuyBox. I might have competition who's like, if there's 10 of us out there, maybe a fair share is 10%. Is that kind of the theory that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And, in all fairness, if you have 10 competitors on the listing, that's a very flooded listing, if you ask me. And, one repricer such as SellerSnap is going to have a really hard time moving 10 all at once, because some are going to be using repricers, some are going to be repricing manually, some are going to set fixed prices. So we really want to focus on those listings that, we can have much more effect on the listings, such as, when I have one or two or even three other competitors on the listing, and we can really all play around with each other. And again, the goal is to try to raise that price. And what a lot of sellers, and it's kind of funny conversation that we have with customers from time to time, is that by using SellerSnap, we're actually raising the value of the entire listing. And so that means when we raise our price and your competitor comes up with us and we say, all right, we're going to give them their fair share of BuyBox as well, they're actually winning. And that brings us back to the prisoner's dilemma, right? Where the idea is, if we work together, we all win. Amazon is the e-commerce Goliath, right? And there is some will argue otherwise, but I argue that there's enough of the pie for everybody. And so in terms of looking at it from a seller's perspective, when we're focusing, because especially Amazon takes, if you're doing FBA especially, you have referral fees, you have FBA fees, you have prep fees, you have all these other things to worry about. We need to focus on profit and profit margin in order to make sure that there's still turnover. We're still generating revenue for expanding my business and keeping a roof over your head, right? So because really at the end of the day, revenue doesn't pay the bills, but profit and profit margin do.
Right. Does this look at inventory levels as well, in terms of how it looks at?
Are you asking about inventory levels in terms of my inventory levels or my competitors' inventory levels?
Maybe we'll take one at a time. So if it does this have an effect on me as a seller's inventory levels, how it determines how it's going to price it? So
out of the box, the AI does not look at my own inventory levels as a seller, because we're still saying, I want to capture the sales, but I want to do it at the highest possible price. And so there are some sellers that say, look, I need to make sure that I'm in stock for as long as possible, or I'm not going to be able to replenish for a long period of time, or there's a trillion different scenarios, and I can go down that rabbit hole anytime. But the idea is that, again, with the customizability, you can say, if my quantity drops below 50, let's start to back off the BuyBox. I don't need to be selling as much. And so we do have the capability to look at our own inventory levels and make different repricing decisions. But the common question that comes up is about my competitors' inventory levels. And I know that there's a ton of, some other tools, extensions that sellers will use in order to look at the inventory levels of their competitors. But at the end of the day, in order for us to be able to use that data, we would actually need it to come from Amazon themselves, rather than at the moment, a third party or even scraping data. Because if anybody knows about, the agreement with Amazon as a third-party developer, we've agreed not to scrape data. So it's not something that because it doesn't come from Amazon, we don't use those data points to reprice.
I was gonna say, in terms of data, what is yours versus what is Amazon's? Is it all Amazon's data in this capacity? When you're doing repricing and looking at like trends and flows of products, does that make sense? Like, is this data that you can kind of say, hey, we know these trends are going to start happening. We can start to not manipulate, but we can start to look at it ourselves. That's not data that Amazon technically owns, is it?
Right. So the data that comes in from Amazon, or the data that SellerSnap uses at its core, let's start there.
Yeah.
Is raw data from Amazon. Whether it's
MWS or API integrations or anything like that.
Exactly. So all that data that's available to the sellers through the API is made available to us. Mm-hmm. From there, we take that data, we run our own calculations, we manipulate it in our own way. We make our own assumptions in order to make the different repricing decisions, display certain information, within the UI as well, to give the best possible picture to those sellers.
Gotcha. So if I'm an Amazon seller in an international marketplace, or if I'm just selling online and I want to use this across multiple different marketplaces, where, especially since this show is international focused, what marketplaces do you guys help and offer solutions in? Is it just .com or is there other places?
So we operate in both North America and the EU.
Okay.
And so those are our real focus right now. And I can tell you, and I'm sure anyone who has ever dealt with Amazon from a tech standpoint can tell you that there's always new things happening on Amazon. And so right now, that is really our focus, is to make sure that we continue to provide that awesome repricing and analytics service for those marketplaces.
What is the most exciting thing that you've seen, whether it's this tool or other things that Amazon has rolled out, from your expertise as an e-commerce pro? What's the most exciting thing that's coming or might be coming, or that Amazon has like released recently in terms of like the capabilities for third-party sellers to kind of sell online?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Upcoming exciting things.
We're all about the hard-hitting questions here. We like to talk about, what people see on the other side. Like what gets them up in the morning? What gets them excited to be in the business though?
So yeah, totally. I'm totally understand that. So I think one of the most exciting things that's gonna be happening this year, and I have a quick 1-2 punch on this, is that the first thing is Amazon is and has recently made available a brand new API. So the old API is still up and operational. Everybody's using it, but it's going to slowly, to my understanding, and again, I'm not a developer, not an expert on the coding side, but I believe that is going to be phased out, and I'm sure at the size of Amazon, that could even be years in the future until they can completely move over. But that new API is supposed to have a lot of really great new information and more accurate information. And most exciting about that specific API, the new API, is information on the business BuyBox, on that B2B BuyBox. Okay. And that is the most interesting thing that's going to be happening. That's going to be happening in the near future.
Gotcha. What about kind of the scariest data points that you're seeing, or most interesting data points that you're seeing that's come out? For example, and I'll lead the way with my own example. Recently announced, and this is just data in general, but I think it was from January 2021, that 75% of the new Amazon sellers that come into the marketplace in general it's not scary. It's just kind of fascinating. Are all coming from China. So new Amazon sellers that are entering the Amazon ecosystem are all coming from China. That's fascinating to me because that's where China as a marketplace is seeing growth, not just as entrepreneurs, but as business people in general on Amazon. And there's just more people that see the value of selling on Amazon's ecosystem in general. So there's not just this wave of Amazon sellers that are coming on and selling on their marketplaces, but majority of it is coming from China. What do you think is kind of like data points that are kind of like intriguing, or like kind of you have to stop and think about that as a holistic e-commerce, like holistic viewpoint? Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's really interesting about this whole thing is that we know that a lot of these Chinese e-commerce sellers are really keen to new opportunities and to capitalizing on the current opportunities out there. And so, from time to time, you hear people saying that you want to kind of expand your e-commerce business outside of just one marketplace on Amazon, and whether it's eBay, Shopify, Walmart, Etsy, everything else in between, Postmates, and I think that there's something to be said about not putting all your eggs in one basket, but also understanding that there's still very much an opportunity there.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I would say that it's never too late to hop into e-commerce. Is there a marketplace that you guys think are like you said, you're focusing big on EU right now? Is there one in particular that you're really focused on in terms of the growth aspect of you'll either see lots of sellers coming from or a lot more just buying happening? Do you see like a growth factor in terms of one of these marketplaces over another? For example, in terms of size wise and eyeballs, number one is obviously Amazon.com. That's where the most people sell. That's where most people, most of the market is going, and most sellers are selling in. Sorry, I need to turn off my alarm. My wristwatch every day at 10:45. It almost always wants to go off. I never set that alarm, but here we are. So .com is number one by far and away. I think it's 4.1 billion views every single month, which is a lot.
Right.
Number two and 2A is Germany and UK. And I always tout this on the show is those are two, they're doing about 70% of the business in the EU is UK and Germany, albeit like they flip-flop back and forth. And I think that's roughly, I want to say 1.8 billion views or so each is the last time I looked at those marketplaces. And then third is Japan, believe it or not. Third, in terms of eyeballs and traffic and marketplace, it's Japanese.jp in terms of Amazon Marketplace. Is there a marketplace on Amazon that you guys are looking at in terms of just the biggest potential, almost like a bet, if you had to put a bet on it with your own money, your own repricing strategies and whatnot, if you saw that there's going to be an X factor growth, where would that be it for you? This doesn't have to be Seller Snap's perspective. It could be your own perspective.
Yeah, totally. I think that when you're asking that questions, two kind of geos and marketplaces came to mind. The first one is India, and the second one was Japan. We know that Japan has some really is growing really fast, and the interesting thing about Japanese culture, to my understanding, is that they are super understand brands, right? And as a whole, can trust being able to trust brands is something that there's a lot of value in that. And so, seeing that so many Japanese trust Amazon shows that there's huge potential there. And then India, being one, I remember, in the days of school, you learned about, the developing BRICS nations, right? India is the I in that, along with, Brazil, Russia, and China, is just in terms of like the volume that of sales that you'd be able to get in India, I think there's a lot of interest there as well in terms of kind of an emerging Amazon market.
Awesome. And those are all great insights. Do you think, is there, before we kind of wrap up on the show today, is there any other sort of like things that we need to know in terms of like repricing, or like, again, in terms of like between rule-based or repricers or AI Amazon repricers, anything specific that we can look at and we need to educate our audience on today that we might have missed?
Yeah, I got two things.
Okay.
That
Yeah. Leave us with these two nuggets. Yeah, exactly.
The first one, it keeps coming back to, you keep mentioning the idea of international sellers. And I understand that, your PingPong's customer base is really focused on, kind of that cross-border e-commerce seller, right? And one of the things that a lot of sellers might not realize when it comes to repricing is that when we are on a single marketplace or a single seller ID, which spans across multiple marketplaces, such as the EU. So you have your one seller ID, but your one seller ID operates in the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, even the Netherlands, Sweden, everything else that they're opening up, is that the technical limit for the API is the same, whether you're utilizing, a repricer on one marketplace or on all of them. So you're sharing resources in that matter. So for example, feeds and whatnot, when we're talking about repricing feeds, you're sharing that limit that Amazon gives you. And so what I talk to a lot of EU sellers about is understanding, just like you said, we see the same thing in terms of the UK and Germany being really the biggest markets. And so having a good look at how you're using technology and how you allocate those resources that are scarce at this point, they're limited, is super important. So if you ever have a question about that, they can reach out directly to me or SellerSnap, and we're happy to talk through all these different technical intricacies. And then the second thing goes back to what we spoke about earlier, is in terms of using a repricer. If you find yourself, with that problem of I'm spending too much time repricing my items manually or even with a tool, that means it's already too late. Focus on the places where you can grow and expand, and leave the automation to the automators, right? And that's why third-party softwares such as SellerSnap, such as PingPong exist, is to provide a service and to provide value in order to make your life easier, so you can do what you do best in terms of sourcing and selling.
Love it. Ian, thank you so much again for hopping on as a guest today. I know that there's more we can dive into, but in terms of a high level, obviously, we wanted to keep it pretty short and sweet today. But for people who want to learn more information, again, I put in the comments of our show below, but also if you check out the link in the comments section of the show on social media, you will be able to be directed to sellersnap.io. I know PingPong just hopped up on their page, I believe just today, in terms of like what opportunities we're going to be working with them to help our sellers grow internationally as well. And I know there's more things coming from our end in partnership integration as well. So Ian, how can they maybe reach out to you directly if they want to work with you, or just have questions like, hey, don't know exactly, this is the first time using a repricing tool, how do I get set up, or anything like that? How do they best reach out to you guys?
So, you can reach out to our team through sellersnap.io and ask any questions you want. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. You can look for Ian Kaneshiro. It's right here in this nifty little bar right here. never can get it right. There we go. And you can look for Ian Kaneshiro on Facebook or LinkedIn. Happy to communicate that way. And if you prefer email, you can find me at ian@sellersnap.io.
That's awesome. And then one final thing before we hop off today. What's it like living in Tel Aviv? I've met more people from Israel in terms of the tech space just online in 2021 than I ever have in my entire life. I feel like it's a big tech hub that's like really growing. What's it like? You moved from the United States over to Tel Aviv. What's kind of that process like? Is there, maybe tell us your own like quick little high level viewpoint of it.
Yeah,
I've never been, so that's why I'm curious.
First of all, when the skies open up, come on over, man. You're more than welcome. I'll buy the beer.
I have lots of people who are like, come on over to Israel. And I'm like, as soon as like I can, like I have to leave my state first, but that's kind of like, that's first step. Yeah.
We're here for you. But really, to put it in a box, I like to describe it as having kind of the tech of Silicon Valley, of San Francisco, right?
Right.
But the weather of LA.
There you go.
And so you got the best of both worlds. You have the tech and you have the beach. And when you can combine that, it's a lot of work, but there's also some play involved, which is the real reason why we do anything, right?
Yeah, that's right. Ian, it snowed 4 to 6 inches this morning, so I have to go outside after this and snow blow my driveway. So I'm not looking forward to that. I'm like, how much longer can we stretch this podcast so I don't have to do that and get cold outside? But
I'm telling you, if you fly here for the winter, I was at the beach yesterday and it was beautiful. So
alas, my wife will like look at me and say, I need to leave today at some point. I need that driveway. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I will. I love her very much. Again, yesterday was Valentine's Day and I knew that was going to be, hey, honey, like, let's talk about that. It's like, let's talk about that driveway. We need to leave at some point today. It needs to happen. So, but yeah, thanks, man, for hopping on again for this podcast of crossover commerce. It's been fantastic learning about, again, just the basics of BuyBox, and then obviously how repricing tools can really help amplify. Is there a statistic you can maybe leave us with, like using a tool like this can maybe leave us with, like, just using a repricing tool can help grow X or help us grow Y or put this to the bottom line? Is there a statistic you guys tout?
So there's no statistic we tout because, again, every seller is different, depending on where you source from, how you source, just because you have a repricer doesn't mean you'll be successful. But I can tell you that, most third-party sellers with, I'd say probably, over 50 listings are using a third-party repricer. And so that is that should be something in itself to show you that if you're not using a repricer, you should go out and find one.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ian, so much for hopping on today. Again, friend of the show. So much from SellerSnap, Ian Kaneshiro of SellerSnap. Go ahead and check them out online. We put those in our show notes, so go ahead and check those out there. So, Ian, go ahead and stick around. I'll come back to you right after we cap off this episode. So,
all right.
Thanks again for hopping on.
All right. Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. And then everyone, again, for watching us on Crossover Commerce. This is episode, again, 57, I believe, of our show. It's been fantastic because this is how we kick off our week. Almost every single week, we go live 4 to 5 times a week on both LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm going to be going crazy this week because if you listened to me last week, I'm going live 6 times this week. How does the math work if you're talking about 5 times in a business week? I don't know, because one of these days I'm going to be going live twice. So stick with me and make sure you tune in twice on this Friday. We are going to be going live on multiple different ways. So this is how our week kind of lines up, everyone. Follow PingPong Payments on social media, especially on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And that's where we put all of our upcoming episodes. And then follow myself on Ryan Kramer again. If you search for Ryan Kramer on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, that's where I put all of our content out there in terms of what's coming up in terms of our shows. So how this week works out, we had a fantastic conversation with Ian of Seller Snap. We're talking with Frank Acosta of Creative Percent. We're going to be talking and going over building brands that move with Amazon video ads. So we're talking about video ads and how to stand out and build your brand through video ads tomorrow. After that, we're going to be coming and talking about sourcing. One of the great minds in sourcing, Kian Gazari of Sourcing by Kian. He has a fantastic YouTube page. He has worked with the NBA. He has worked with the Olympics. He has worked with big brands X, Y, Z. He's also a big component of the Titan network. If you're an Amazon seller, huge in the Amazon space in those kind of circles. But we're going to be going over sourcing and product sourcing in 2021, everything you need to know on a high level. So we're going to be talking with him on Wednesday. On Thursday, we're going to go over with Joe Valley of Quiet Light Brokerage. Again, exiting Amazon businesses, such a huge topic to cover in 2020 and 2021. We want to go over with him how to reverse engineer a path to an exit. So he's going to educate us in terms of how that looks. And then Friday, I'm really excited about Friday because I have two episodes that we're going to be touting with. My first one is going to be in the morning. It's going to be 10 a.m. Eastern. So it's really exciting. I'm going to have, basically, I'm calling it the Women of Amazon Roundtable in kind of partnership with Branded by Women event that's going on, I believe, next week. We wanted to have some of the best minds in the Amazon ecosystem and just talk about what 2021 looks like, their brand stories, their success stories, both on the seller side and on the service provider side. So I'm really excited to have multiple women on. We're just going to talk about Amazon ecosystem on Friday. And then also Friday afternoon, Andrew Morgans of Markenology. We're going to be talking about building your Amazon legacy. So go ahead and stick with me through this really crazy but awesome content week of Crossover Commerce. Again, I'm Ryan Kramer, the host of this show. It's been a pleasure to bring episodes like this to you. So go ahead and let us know what you think, whether on social media and tag us on there, or go ahead and share these episodes so that your network can see it again on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Again, Ryan Kramer of PingPong Payments, and this is our show, Crossover Commerce. Thank you for listening to us today, and join us again tomorrow where we have more exciting Amazon and e-commerce content coming at you. Stay safe, everyone.